You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1. Welcome to Missed Apex Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Reddy, but my friends call me Spanners, so let's be friends. The title of today's show is Canada Dry? And that show title was suggested by Uncle Steve in our patron Slack group. Welcome to our Canadian Grand Prix race review, a race that kind of fizzled after the safety car strategies were left on the table, but another interesting chapter in the F1 2023 season. So we'll ask, has the field closed the gap to Red Bull? Is the Aston Martin hype train back on the rails? And is Russell up to the task of being the future king of Mercedes? We'll also ask, why can't Perez do Saturdays? And why is Hulkenberg destined to never get a podium? We are an independent podcast produced in the podcasting shed with the kind permission of our better halves. We aim to bring you a race review before your Monday morning commute. We might be wrong, but we're first. I'm joined in the shed by Matt Trumpets. How's it going, Matt?
Well, since we didn't see a groundhog on track, I'm afraid to report that it's going to be 6 more weeks of Max winning that we're up for.
I thought you were going to say we'd have to watch the Canadian Grand Prix again until spring.
Well, that was my other option, but I went the other direction this time.
We're also joined by resident tech expert and TikTok sensation, Antonia Rankin. How's it going, Antonia?
Hi, yeah, I hope we don't have to watch that race on repeat because it was a race of should've, would've, and could've's.
Well, we'll explore that, and I'm delighted we're being joined again by Canadian, and it's not just a token Canadian, Cristina Mace. How's it going, Cristina?
It's going okay. I'm running on 4 hours of sleep and 2 energy drinks, so we'll see.
To be 20-something again. Right, let's get into the Canadian Grand Prix. Okay, I think actually, Matt, the most interesting thing, like we normally look for like a big ticket item, a big race, a clashing of titans throughout a Grand Prix. This race didn't deliver that. However, perhaps the biggest talking point is it did look a little bit like the field had closed the gap on Red Bull. Is that real?
All those accountants back at the FIA are like, I told you so. I told you so. Eventually, that testing restriction would matter. But to answer your actual question, sorry about that. To answer your actual question, it sure seemed like it, didn't it? Now, Montreal is not a quote unquote representative track in the way that Barcelona is. So you got to add that in there. But Aston brought a fairly huge upgrade. And there was distinctly a moment where Alonso was on the radio and he was being told to lift and coast. And he said, I'll do whatever. I want to win this thing. And I believe that's not just an Alonso saying Alonso things. I think he genuinely thought at a certain point in the race that they had the pace to take it to the Red Bull. Unfortunately, I think other things intervened. But yeah, it's sure looking close right now.
Ranking. Yeah. So I was going to say, yeah. Well, Alonso was saying that he'd potentially be 2 seconds behind, and that's what they were aiming for.
Yeah, I mean, at the start of the race, it was quite refreshing to see that Lewis Hamilton only managed to drop out of DRS after 4 laps and not the normal half a lap that everyone else seems to be trailing behind Verstappen. I mean, the gaps did seem to have closed up a little bit, and it was a really promising race in a lot of ways. I mean, it was great to see Mercedes fighting up there. Obviously, with George, there was an unfortunate mistake, ruined his race. It happened. But yeah, with the Aston Martins as well, they brought a very big upgrade that did seem actually to have them in pretty good stead. I think there was a brief mention at the end of the race that Alonso was fighting a little bit of an issue. So given his performance for the race, he actually did a blimming fantastic job to stick it in P2. With that said, though, Lance was in a bit of no man's land for the rest of the race. And I have to say, it was a bit of an underwhelming race result from him. I mean, he got a little bit stuck in that DRS train. So those upgrades obviously didn't put him pegs above everyone else, because otherwise he would have been blitzing through it. But yeah, definitely some promise.
And something else that was underwhelming, Cristina, I don't want you to feel attacked as our token Canadian, but obviously every single year people wheel out the 2011 race with 8 red flags, 4 billion pit stops, Jenson Button sticking his teammate in the wall and hitting everybody. It's a great track. I love it, but you need to supply rain every year, I think, to make it like to buzz, don't you?
I mean, the predictability with which that track also gets rain is pretty stellar. Like, it does make me question kind of why they continue to hold the race at this time of year, because Montreal consistently gets rain during that time. So, yes, it's good for the spectacle of it all that they're hosting it during this time. But I also pity all of the Canadians that are just in the stands in their rain ponchos.
Are they not?
And I could just feel the dampness.
Well, are they not used to it? Like,
through myself.
If there's any nations where you go, they're going to be okay being rained on. If you had to pick any 3 nations to fill the stands, you go, right, well, the Brits are happy being rained on, probably the Dutch, because they live basically underwater, and the Canadians.
Yeah, Canadians and bad weather kind of go hand in hand. It is typically not an issue, but you would prefer to be dry and warm and comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, in F1, obviously rain is the great equalizer. So it really is nice, especially at a circuit like Montreal, where we get a little bit of that thrown in. And in quali yesterday, it really proved to be a decisive factor.
Oh, man.
I mean,
yeah.
Verstappen showed his just masterful performance, I think, yesterday in quali. He was fantastic. And I mean, there were some really, really stellar examples. Alexander Albon, where he navigated the dry patches of the track to a T. It was amazing to watch.
I think it is worth actually just lingering on qualifying a little bit, because it was such a mixed up qualifying session. In that Q2, Antonia, like Williams, so Williams obviously gets some of the credit for going, hang on, this might be dry conditions, but like you make a mistake, you go offline, you don't end up producing what Albon produced. And it wasn't just one lap. I think he like put in 2 or 3 like real good laps.
Yeah, I think as a team, generally, they made some very intelligent calls strategically in quali. They put the right tyres on in the slicks window in the right time before the rain rejoined. And, quali effectively ended early, didn't it? With the rain picking up again.
Q2 was like the most interesting bit of that, wasn't it?
Well, exactly. But I really do want to give credit where it's due to Albon, because his performance was just so skillful. It was masterful the way he navigated those conditions. And it makes me almost sad that he is kind of peaking almost in his technical skills now, as opposed to a few years ago in the Red Bull, because I would love to see him in a higher performing car now, especially now that he's doing almost these George Russellian moves in Williams, where it's like, okay, cool, he can make the step up now, he can graduate.
George Russellian. I like that, Matt. Hey, Matt, you've been a big long-term fan of Alex Albon. So to see a performance like that, where you go, yeah, driver skill is really going to be a differentiating factor here. He's got arguably the worst car on the grid, and then suddenly to pop up and just be lighting up that timesheet. Yes, of course, the tyre choice made a difference, but there would have been other drivers who'd made that same tyre choice and not made it stick. And that could have affected the whole qualifying, because he showed you could do it, whereas, I don't know, some other drivers might have gone out there on slicks and put it in the wall.
So it is interesting. A lot of times qualifying doesn't matter that much, but Albon's choice, or I would assume Williams' choice to put him on slicks, or the pair of them in Q2, changed everything about this race, and not just for Albon. Because he was so fast, we have Leclerc wanting to be on those tires and not, and now we have proof that Leclerc was right, and once again, Ferrari was wrong, in qualifying at least.
Oh my God.
We have Perez, we have a lot of people bailing late to get onto these tires after the best conditions have passed, and only the people who could get temperature into those tires, which was not an easy task, were able to actually take advantage of it. So we saw people like Alonso elect to stay on Enders, smart move, I think, given his lap timings, and actually get through into Q3 easy. But other people, like Perez, went on to the slicks late, couldn't get them working, and then went on to the inners and didn't have enough time to get them back up to temperature and make it through. And that affected his entire race. So this is a weird race. And again, also in the race where Williams made the dominant strategy call every time and drove almost all of the action that we're going to talk about.
Well, it just goes to show how important it is to be proactive in making these strategy calls and to be completely on the ball, because the reactivity of some of these teams was shocking. I mean, for example, Ferrari really dropped the ball
She said
in
it.
quali.
She said the F word.
I'm so sorry. I know this is a family-friendly show.
That was the saddest.
We did well, but it was hard to watch. And I mean, at times, I honestly, and I say this hand on heart, think if you put me in that Ferrari pit box, I could do a better job.
I honestly, for the last few years, I think a lot of people think that. And the most crushing thing I've ever heard was Leclerc going, "Hi, I'm a talented and fantastic race driver, and I'm here on track in my race car, and I've been doing this for ages. I'm pretty good at it. Please, can I have some slick tires, because I think that's the best tire for this condition." And then his engineer go, "Yeah, but like all the cool kids are still on intermediates." So that's what he said. He said, "Max is on inters, therefore you stay on inters too." That's heartbreaking. Like the drivers are telling Ferrari what to do, and time after time, they're just inventing. That's what they're doing, Antonia. They're inventing.
I saw it in the race today. Sainz talking to his pit wall engineer, going, "I can stay out. Let me stay out." And then the pit wall engineer going, "Okay, stay out, stay out, stay out." Like, we know that's not you telling Sainz what to do. That was Sainz forcing your hand, going, "I know better here." And I've been saying this for months and for months and for months. There is such a breakdown in communication between the Ferrari pit wall and their drivers, because first of all, the drivers aren't getting the information that they need. Sainz in quali, for example, why was he not told that there were faster cars approaching?
Oh my God,
yes. Such a basic principle of quali. You get told when there is a faster car approaching so that you don't impede them. That's one of your main jobs as a pit wall engineer. Again, something that I watched it and I went, well, I could have told him that someone was coming.
I could watch his GPS, pay me some money.
Come on, and there is such a breakdown between what the pit wall are telling the drivers, but not just that, what they're listening to from the drivers. It's like they don't trust the drivers to make the right call whatsoever. And these drivers are blimmin' fantastic. I said at the start of the 2022 season, Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz were the best driver lineup on the grid. And look where they are now. Not a championship between them.
That's a right old rant, that. That is a right old rant. Trumpets.
I apologise.
Trumpets, tell her why she's wrong. Defend Ferrari.
Well, okay, here's why you were wrong. First of all, it was very clear that the engineer heard what Charles Leclerc had to say about those tires and just ignored him.
Yeah.
Second of all, I would wager there was a 9-hour meeting with all of the engineers, top management, Elkan, Vinya, and all those people pointing out how Leclerc was right. So when it was Carlos' turn to say, "I want to stay out," whoever was in charge of making that choice, they like to call them decision makers apparently these days, was like, "Oh yeah, that guy got dragged for ignoring Charles. I think I'll listen to what Carlos has to say." But you are right. I think it's a symptom though. I think the issue is with the decision-making process and with the culture of the team. They're told this is a strategy, and whoever's in charge of that strategy will not wander outside of that box unless they hear from 19 different people signed off in triplicate. And that's what we've seen over and over.
Yeah. Cristina.
Well, as much as I am always discouraged by Ferrari these days, I'm also mildly encouraged because they have a new team principal. And we're nearing that halfway mark through a year. And so I am hoping that we're going to start seeing change soon.
The Vasseur effect getting infused in, eh?
I mean, you would hope that it would have some change. You would hope that hiring a new person, because they recognized at the end of last year, we have a problem and we need to attack it. And they've chosen that to be the new team principal. So fingers crossed that now that he's been there for 6 months, maybe we'll start seeing changes after summer break. Maybe we have to wait for a full year. I'm hoping it doesn't take that long, but I'm being stupid probably, but I am hoping that we're near the end of
not stupid
of this horrendous.
I think mean. So I'm going to say, how dare you, Cristina? How dare you give Ferrari fans hope? They are out there and they have worked hard to remove all vessel of hope out of their body, and there you are sprinkling some new hope in.
Live for the hope of it all.
Antonia.
See, this is the thing. I don't think that Binotto was the issue with Ferrari. I think Ferrari was the issue with Ferrari.
Yes,
they are their
fundamental.
own worst enemy. I think there are issues in every layer of Ferrari's team, wherein the breakdowns in communication are at every single stage. Because I wish it were a quick fix, but I guess after 6 months, surely it doesn't take 6 months for people to start learning from their mistakes. I mean, it's been so long.
It's been 84 years.
You know, it has been centuries. You know, and how does it take this long for a team to go, oh, actually, we should listen to our drivers who are amongst the most talented individuals at this in the world? You know, we've got a new team principal at Aston Martin and he's absolutely killing it. They're doing great. So I don't think it's that simple. I wish it were.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And
yeah, go
on. Overall, though, I do agree that Benito probably wasn't the problem. But I do think replacing him could potentially be the solution, because he very obviously just kept denying that there was a problem. And Vassar, at the very least, is saying we recognize there are things we can do better. And I think that's where I'm getting the most hope, is that he's actually acknowledging and saying, we're going to make change. Stop it.
They've been through enough. But look, this has been a very difficult topic. And if you've been affected with any of the issues that we've led with here today, you know, you can email us feedback@missedapex.net. And if you see a Ferrari fan just out and about, you know, see someone in a Ferrari shirt or a Ferrari hat, just offer them a hug. That's what I would say. Offer them a hug, hold them close and say, look, we're all F1 fans. It's going to be okay. I don't think it's going to be okay, but don't tell them that. Right, let's move on to something more positive, Matt, and that is Aston Martin, who were being very bullish in the form of Fernando Alonso saying, right, we're going to be 2 seconds behind Red Bull. We're going to really be pushing them. The Canadian upgrades are going to be really great. Now, I wonder whether there was like a really positive step up with an upgrade, or whether they just thought kind of the upgrades that they've been bringing or the package they have was going to suit Canada, because they were so confident about how their performance was going to be in the Canadian Grand Prix. And it kind of did come to fruition. We were back to where we would expect them to have been given their previous season performance. So upgrades, track specific, where are we at?
No, I don't think they're track specific. I think Aston will have circuits where it does better because of the inherent characteristics of the car. It has an extremely good amount of downforce. It is not as efficient as a Red Bull car, but the place that they have always dominated, and Red Bull, Mercedes, any team on the grid, the place they've dominated since they showed up with their car has been in the braking zones. They are better on braking than any other team right now on the grid. And you can see it into turn one, you can see it into the hairpin. So any race that features these kinds of really big braking zones, you can look for Aston to be making some hay.
Okay,
that said, they're talking like a team who's very confident in their correlation between their CFD and wind tunnel.
They knew. Yeah.
And what they see. And think about it, too. This is like FP1 was gone because of the TV issue. We might talk about that later. FP2 was wet mass qualifying. FP3 equal disaster, not at all representative track conditions. And with a brand new huge upgrade, they walked into the race on Sunday and came a lot closer to winning it than probably most people thought they could have.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you said about braking, you would think on a circuit like in Canada, where braking is very intense, they would absolutely dominate. However, they weren't necessarily right on top. I mean, it took until lap 22 for Alonso to take Hamilton, so it wasn't quite as emphatic as I think you would have expected it to be.
Yeah, so if you want to kind of ruin it, Matt, for if you want to ruin it for Aston Martin fans and Alonso fans, there's a few factors. So, so it's a track that isn't testing, for example, Mercedes' new downforce high-speed corner upgrades. So Mercedes was sort of nerfed in that way, and Mercedes knew in advance, and they said in advance, it's not going to suit us, the track layout and the track surface. So if I wanted to ruin it for Alonso fans, you could say perhaps this is a temporary reprieve?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, the nature of the circuit will benefit some cars more than others. And this is definitely one that played to the strengths that Aston absolutely had.
Okay, so let's look at the dynamic between the two drivers. Cristina, Lawrence Stroll said by the end of the season, Lance Stroll, and now listen, your government will be listening to this. Your compatriot Lance Stroll will be level with Fernando Alonso by the end of the season. That's what the team boss says. True or false?
Well, that's false.
You're going to get kicked out of Canada.
It's all good. I'm going to be heading out on my own anyway soon. But look, I think it's just very, what's the word? It's on the tip of my tongue, but very presumptuous to say that this driver who has been consistently in the midfield for his entire career could come close to being on par with a two-time world champion who, under the right circumstances, could have won many other championships in the last couple of years. Like, he is a world championship caliber driver. So to say that Lance could come close to that performance of Alonso, that Lance could learn from Alonso, I think would be much
but he didn't
more
say
appropriate
that. He didn't say
and
that.
encouraging.
He said.
I know he didn't say that.
He said he's going to be level with the two-time world champion and F1 great Alonso.
Yeah, it's one of those statements that pretty much everybody can see right through and just be like, you know what?
Yeah.
We get it, Dad. It's your kid, but you know.
I know, it's bad. Antonia, can Cristina come and live with you when she gets kicked out of Canada?
You are more than welcome anytime, as long as you put some respect on Lance's name. I think the daddy's boy of F1 could do a bit better than we're all giving him credit. I completely agree. Level with Alonso is a huge stretch. However, they are in the same machinery. In theory, not in theory, there should not be the gap that there is. Alonso pushing for constant podiums and Lance struggling to tread water down in the midfield is completely unacceptable. That's as simple as it gets. These drivers are the 20 best drivers in the world. They need to be competitive. If Alonso is the best in the game, yeah, fair enough. Lance is also meant to be amongst the best in the game. And if he's not keeping up with his teammate, who is the most comparable driver to himself in terms of performance this season, then they really, really seriously need to have a look at him, because I think it's been a while now, to be completely honest, that he hasn't lived up to the standard that he should be living up to. So whilst I think, yes, he's a great driver and he could, have the potential to be up there fighting for podiums, there has to be a barrier as to why he isn't, because at the moment, I've been quite underwhelmed with how he's performing.
And Matt, bearing in mind that in the apocalypse, Canada is going to be one of your closest safe zones, interject carefully.
I don't know. It's been on fire recently, so I'm not as convinced of that as I
Good point. I would swim for Greenland.
I think that's where we're all headed. I'm going to make a counter argument here. Aside from qualifying, which I honestly just can't remember why Lance wound up where he did, or even where he wound up. He had a really good race today.
Really?
He had a pretty spectacular race today. In fact, now imagine this. I'm a driver and my team pits me the lap before the safety car comes out. That would be Lance. And then they see something in the data and they pit me like 5 laps before everybody else. And I go from basically like the back, P15 or whatever, and I wind up in 9th place because I passed the guy in 10th on the line on the last lap. Lance was for quite some time the fastest guy on the track after his second pit stop for the new fresh hard tires, and pretty much all the midfield wound up going for that 2-stop strategy as a result, but it was an optical illusion. They did it to get him out of traffic and let him run in free air, because traffic, the T word, which I think we're going to talk about later with Antonia, is definitely a thing that affected the race today.
I see your very well reasoned and understandable points, and I raise you.
Hyperbole.
But what about every single other race?
No, there is that. And there's definitely a broader conversation to be had there. But actually, Antonia, I wanted to go to you next because Bruce in the Patreon live chat, patreon.com/Missed Apex, support an independent podcast, was talking about this being a point and squirt circuit. So I think I was trying to allude to it when I say, well, okay, this isn't the sort of track that the Mercedes upgrades would be aimed at. And it looks like the battle for second place, because Ferrari are just desperate to take themselves out of it. The battle for second place really is between Hamilton and Alonso at the moment. So give me some insight a little bit into, how the different cars will suit, different circuits. Well, perhaps you and Matt as well, like, what's the main characteristics of each car that we can look at in the races coming up?
Well, like Matt was saying, a circuit like this in Canada should, in theory, be very well suited to the Aston Martins. So Pirelli actually rated Canada as a 5 out of 5 in braking intensity.
Ooh, okay.
Which is why we saw so many braking issues in so many of the cars, aka George Russell at Mercedes. It really did not suit their car this weekend. Yeah. George's brakes overheated, probably also due to being in the DRS train, actually. Not being in clean air really would have caused those brakes to overheat even more so than they were already struggling from just how intense the circuit is. But I mean, in terms of, straight line speed, this circuit in Canada has a lot of long DRS zones broken up, for example, by the final chicane at the end where the Wall of Champions, I have to say, I was very, very upset not to see the Wall of Champions be kissed today even. Mm-hmm. It wasn't even given a little peck. Very disappointing. I wasn't alluding to anything there. I'm just saying we haven't seen Alonso in there. We haven't seen Lewis or Verstappen. It would have been nice. But I mean, the thing about Canada, like you said earlier, it's got a lot of defining characteristics that make it not a quote unquote usual circuit. But Aston Martin did have the upper hand today in terms of the characteristics of the circuit, and they should have, that's why I'm saying they should have done better than they did.
So I think we're gonna move on briefly, but I think that the natural stage, Matt, I think is we talk about the battle. I think the major battle was between Alonso and Hamilton today. So we can straddle that. But I know you think, and I disagree with you, that Alonso had a chance to pressure for the win today. But I honestly think the battle was between Alonso and Hamilton. So, let's get into that. But firstly, why do you think that Alonso had a chance at a win today?
Okay, well, let's go with the assumption the Aston was properly fueled and or didn't have a problem with the fuel pump so that we didn't have to lift and coast. Didn't cost him a lot of time, but it definitely costs you in your braking because it breaks fuel more than you'd like them to. And braking is clearly a big advantage for the Aston. So right off the bat, you've got one.
Sure, but to be fair, if they did underfuel hoping for a safety car, and that's a good bet at Canada that there will be safety cars, and there was, that is still part of your overall strategy. So if there's less safety cars than you want or no safety cars, and you end up having to lift and coast because you underfueled, we can still factor that in when you talk about inherent performance.
Second of all, because it might have been a fuel pump problem. It might not have been an underfuel. I think there was a period of time where the team wasn't sure what was going on, and they were being conservative to make sure there was a fuel sample for the FIA post-race, because they've had some previous experience in that department, if I remember correctly. Second of all, we can blame Hülkenberg.
Yes. How dare he?
Because he got that ridiculous penalty that kicked him out of second place. And second place was the dirty side of the grid on a track that got hugely rained on and was covered in dust. If Alonso had been starting in third, where Hamilton started, we'd have had Alonso chasing Max from the start. And I think we would have seen a different character to those first 22 or so laps.
Yeah, just to touch on that briefly, I would have thought that Hülkenberg getting that penalty would have been a godsend for Mercedes, right? Because that, in theory, should have prevented them from being stuck behind a really pesky DRS train type dynamic in the first few laps. So you would have thought, oh, fantastic. Mercedes, second row lockout, off they go into the sunset towards Max Verstappen. And they didn't. So I think that penalty in so many ways was very underwhelming. Of course, also for Hulkenberg. I'm sure he didn't like it very much either.
Yeah, but Hulkenberg's made his deal. He made his deal with the devil. He will be a fantastically handsome and rich F1 driver for years to come. And I think he'll still be racing at 50, but he is doomed.
We've had enough of your crush on Hulkenberg.
He's doomed to never, ever get a podium. Have you seen that man's jaw? My goodness. My goodness. He's like a Viking god. I will not back down from this, Miss Rankin. I will not back down. But Matt, I honestly do disagree with you that there was any serious prospect of Alonso challenging. I really feel like they should have been looking, backwards in their mirrors. Initially losing out to Hamilton just meant that his battle with Hamilton was harder today.
Well, yeah, because it's not an easy place to pass, and because Aston isn't as fast in a straight line as, say, a Williams. But I just put you the woulda, coulda, shoulda to you. Had Alonso persisted after Max, and on the hard tire where Verstappen admitted on the radio twice and in the cool down room afterwards as well, that they were struggling to get those tires up to temperature, the higher downforce, Aston would have had a serious advantage on that hard tire against the Red Bull. And he would have gone into that third stint a lot closer to Max. Now, the other thing I want to point out to you, and this is why, did you notice how Max sounded kind of anxious about this until we started hearing all the lift and coast messages, and then we also got additional confirmation Alonso had a rear brake problem? That's when he was being relaxed and laughing about almost crashing himself out of the Grand Prix. Up until then, he was telling the team, look, these tires are no good. And the team was like, yeah, dude, we heard you the first time. You're just going to need to drive this car for a while. Okie dokes.
Yeah, not the only race engineer that had some harsh words for their drivers this weekend. But yeah, Antonia, the Aston Martin looked really good on the hards. Like they specifically, it's so weird, like any low grip condition, the Aston Martin seemed to come to life. So as soon as the rain came on Saturday, they looked great. Well, as soon as it dried out, the advantage went away. When the teams were forced onto the higher tyre early by the safety car, suddenly Aston Martin came to life again.
Yeah, I mean, Pirelli have spoken about Canada, saying that it's typically a low asphalt abrasiveness, a low, in terms of intensiveness on the tires. It's not too difficult, Canada. That's why we were on the softest side of the tire spectrum. But I mean, just going back to the original point, I think if Aston Martin were anywhere near Red Bull, Fernando Alonso took Hamilton lap 22 in a 70-lap race. He had 48 laps to catch up to Max Verstappen. And he didn't. He wasn't really even that close. The only time he closed up the gap was when Verstappen was just chilling out front, having his, every Sunday chill drive in the park that he seems to be doing quite regularly now. I know there were issues and I know the car wasn't perfect, but it wasn't close enough in my opinion.
But Alonso would have gone to the front quicker were it not for Lewis Hamilton cutting him off and doing an unsafe rejoin in the pit lane. So at the safety car pits, they all came in for hards. Lewis Hamilton had a slightly slower stop, got ahead, made Fernando Alonso pump the brakes, dramatically wiggle on the steering wheel. But, Cristina, should that have been a penalty for Lewis Hamilton?
I don't think so. At the end of the day, when they're all going into the pits during that time frame, they know that they have to keep it really tight. They know that they have to be keeping an eye out. And at the end of the day, Fernando did that. He kept an eye on things. He saw that someone was releasing and he reacted accordingly. Like everything went the way it was supposed to go. I don't think it was an unsafe release. I think it was, these are drivers that have really quick reaction times. And if we release a car at this time, the other driver is going to notice and see, and it'll be fine.
I highly recommend, after our chat with Jules and Lucas at the weekend, talking about people who just love to play up to the cameras. There's always that situation in football where someone takes a shot from 25 yards, the power of the shot is fully dissipated by the time it gets to the keeper, but he does like a big rolling dive, and you just know that is for the cameras. Nigel Mansell pushing his Lotus, collapsing, woe is me, for the cameras. Antonia, come on. Alonso, on the steering wheel, panicking. Oh my goodness, I nearly died. The Mercedes in front of me. Oh, woe is me. We only just avoided catastrophe.
Yeah, so the reason I don't watch football is because if I wanted to watch actors, I'd watch a film. And I'm starting to see a little bit of that coming into the F1 radio messages. And
Oh my goodness.
to use some of my psychology knowledge here, you will notice as you watch it, there are certain buzzwords thrown around on the radio by pit wall engineers, you know. So when the unsafe quote unquote release happened, Alonso's engineer came on and went, yeah, that was dangerous. And or
You're
Alonso
right.
will go, that was really unsafe. Almost as if they're trying to plant the idea in the stewards' brains. Like, you hear that?
I love it.
That was unsafe. They released him in an unsafe, you know. And it's like, come on. We are watching what is happening. And exactly as Christina said, these are the drivers with the fastest reaction times, probably of anyone on the planet. They can see when a car is heading towards them. There was no collision. There was no even almost collision. He didn't need to grab on the wheel and go, oh my gosh. You know, it felt a little bit theatrical, playing up to the knowledge that the stewards are listening in. And I think we've started to notice that a little bit more and more. Whenever something happens that a driver doesn't like, they come on the radio to their pit wall engineers, appearing surreptitious, going, oh my goodness, did you see that?
But you don't mean Fernando. Fernando wouldn't do that.
Never. Of course.
That car ahead of me could explode into flames and throw pieces of my car everywhere and kill me.
Yeah,
you should
Norris.
black and orange flag it immediately. The last lap before the race.
So that was Lando Norris with Ocon's rear wing that was kind of moving. It was wobbling a little bit. He's like, yeah, that is going to literally take my head off. You need to definitely disqualify him. Oh, by the way, honourable mention for Lando Norris, because the last lap attempt really held it on the outside until the last possible moment, and then went for the escape road. But yeah, 4 out of 10 for he has to get a meatball flag. I think that car was basically doing that throughout the whole weekend, and I think if that was going to get pulled up, it was going to get pulled up before that. Antonia, quickly, and then I know that Cristina has some regulations for us for the unsafe rejoin, so I want to get into those as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, Ted Kravitz noted it literally at the start of the Grand Prix, said, oh, that Alpine rear wing's looking a little bit wobbly. And Lando would have been following him for a good few laps before saying anything. It was very much he literally said, again, buzzword, he went, that could be so dangerous if that flies like,
oh my God,
it's
that would be like meatballs flying all over my face. Meatballs. Oh my God. But Cristina, in our WhatsApp chat, when Hamilton came out in front of Alonso, a lot of people said slam dunk penalty. Martin Brundle on the commentary said slam dunk penalty. And I think people also were saying, well, if you cause a driver to brake, then that's a penalty. Now, if you, on your driving test, pull out of a junction, out of a T junction, say you turn right, and you cause a driver that was on the major road to slow down and brake, you will get marks on your driving test. But is that the rule in the F1 pit lane?
It's not. The only regulation that you have is that cars must not be released from a garage or pit stop position in a way that could endanger pit lane personnel or another driver. Which incredibly subjective.
Yeah.
Some people are sensitive and are like, oh my goodness, my life flashed before my eyes, which
I nearly died.
Exactly. It's like there are many things that you can nearly die at, sweetie. That doesn't mean that you actually nearly died. Like, I've met 5-year-olds that have just as good theatrics as some of these F1 drivers. It's fantastic. But like many penalties, so much of it is just down to the stewards. The regulations are ladled with the stewards may impose a penalty. They do not have to, but they may. And again, this is one of those situations where it's not nothing is ever penalty-wise necessarily a slam dunk, because it's all down to somebody's personal judgment. And again, with these regulations being so ambiguous, open-ended, some of them do have good history and good precedent, and others don't. So it's one of those penalties where, in my mind,
they're quite random, aren't they, Antonia?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, after Oh gosh, the 2021 race.
No.
Yes, a lot of faith was lost in the objectivity of stewards. However,
I'm drawing a blank.
because these regulations are subjective,
Yeah.
we do have to think, okay, the stewards know what they're doing. If a penalty is necessary in this circumstance, they will enforce it. And in a similar but slightly different circumstance, they will not. You know, whilst there are subjectivities within the regulations, it is incumbent upon us to remember that is for good reason, and the penalty will be enforced on a situation dependent basis. It will change every time according to each individual offense or non-offense. So yeah, there are some subjectivities within the regulations, but that isn't a bad thing. That doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. You know, not every single behavior has to either be right or wrong in racing. So that's not how it works.
I think in this particular circumstance, so obviously if there's a car flying, down the pit lane on the pit lane speeds, and you just, you just happen to pull out in the pit lane and you block them, unsafe release. I get that. But in a situation where you're coming in line astern, the people releasing Hamilton can't possibly know that he was 0.8 seconds slower to change the tyres. And by the way, that has been quite crucial over the last couple of seasons. Mercedes pit stops have been generally just that little bit slower. A lot of good Mercedes pit stops are much closer to 3 seconds than 2 seconds. And here we saw a situation where it was actually quite critical. But there's no way the person releasing them can know that Alonso did it in 2.2 seconds and Mercedes did it in 3 seconds. It's really hard to make that difference. So in this situation, Alonso was inconvenienced, but it's not unsafe. Matt?
Yeah, well, I want to say a lot of these could be dealt with by realizing that if the other car didn't have brakes, it was an unsafe release.
Okay, guys, I think we're going to move on to... actually, I think one of the biggest fails of this race, and that is George Russell really, I think, dropping the ball in a situation where he had a chance to press forward and to stake his claim really into where he fits into the overall picture of Formula One. So he was in arguably the second or third best race car this weekend. He was up there fighting. He's got Max Verstappen up ahead. He's got Lewis Hamilton in second place. He's got Fernando Alonso in third place. His team is sandwiching Aston Martin, their direct rivals, and he puts it in the wall. To me, Matt, this feels like a big fail. Like this is a big setback in Project Russell.
I think we could call it the sophomore struggles. He's established himself at the team. He's done well enough against his teammate. And now the hard yards begin. And this happens, I've used this analogy before, but a lot of times in music, when you play a show, the first time you're in, you're so on top of it. Second time you're in, you're on top of it. The fourth or fifth time, you don't quite know the book, but you're also not really paying the same amount of attention. And that's where the mistakes happen. And I think that's what we're seeing at Russell. He's gotten comfortable, but he doesn't have the mastery of Hamilton yet. So we're seeing these mistakes, silly mistakes that you wouldn't expect him to make. It's part of the process. But the question is, how much will that affect him and his standing in the team until he gets past it?
Cristina, you're relatively new to the Missed Apex realm. So what I like is I like people to tell me who they support as drivers so that we can put their comments into context. Now, I'm famously neutral, but I do understand that some people have stop. Some people have favorite drivers. Cristina, like just from a fandom point of view, where do you lie, and particularly relating to like Lewis Hamilton?
Oh, the big ones this season that I'm like hardcore wanting to see results from are Pierre Gasly,
nice,
Yuki Tsunoda,
yes,
and there was a third one I was excited about. Oscar Piastri.
Sorry about that. Yeah, okay. So, but how about George Russell? Does George Russell tickle your fan tingle at all?
Not yet.
No.
I feel like he is still... I think one day he's going to sparkle. One day he's going to get that shimmer in his eye and just be like on his way to being top at the top, best of the best. But I think right now he's kind of just waiting. Like he's still very much, I feel like, in a learning curve situation where he's not fine-tuning his own driving because he knows that these are his personal faults. I feel like he's kind of just still getting comfortable in Mercedes almost, and not having that ability to be extremely self-critical and extremely
I think you've hit the nail on the head
fine-tuning.
there. Yeah, and this is the thing. Like, you don't sense at all that he's self-critical. You sense that in his world, he's pushing himself as the complete package, pushing to the top. And I wonder. I will go to Matt for this. Actually, I wonder if that's the source of today's error, which is like he was off the pace. He was dropping back from Alonso. He's already asking for what alternative strategies might work, and they said no, just go faster, mate. He tried to go faster and hit the wall, and that does smack of just someone driving out of their comfort zone today. He was told to drive out of his comfort zone. He did, and he hit the wall, which is why I can't be overly critical.
Well, except for, more experienced hands will just simply go as fast as they can without
this
crashing.
is my pace,
They're not going to get baited into that, which is, I think that was a Schumacher claim at Haas too, which I think was actually quite valid. But for Russell, no, he didn't have the pace today. He was desperate to be up or around Hamilton or to find a way around him. And when told, it was a mistake that we saw Max make and not crash. And the difference, once again, I think is mainly one of experience. He just was slightly out of his depth this particular weekend. And he's going to get less forgiveness the longer he's at the team.
Yeah, I completely agree. The longer he's there, the less he's going to be allowed to bide his time and wait for his time to come. There comes a point where you are no longer in the fastest car on the grid. George Russell moved to Mercedes and was expecting an almost immediate world championship, I think. And you get the impression that whilst he is irrefutably, in my opinion, one of the best drivers on the grid and phenomenally talented, a small mistake.
I don't agree.
Don't you dare shake your head at me.
Well, okay, let's have a fight. Let's have a
Square
fight.
up. Let's go. Square up.
Okay, here we go. Russell, over the last 2 seasons, has showed that he doesn't have the ultimate pace of the top drivers, and he cannot compete on race pace with a slightly beyond his peak Lewis Hamilton. He is not the future of Mercedes.
I see that, and I raise you, is he meant to be directly in line with a 7-time world champion?
I thought that was the whole point.
He is a phenomenal driver, George Russell. But again, I think there's an element of unrealized talent in the fact that he's kind of waiting for the car to grow around him rather than him growing into the car. He's kind of waiting for Mercedes to get back into their heyday, I think, and get back into their phenomenal, excellent performance. And then he'll start showing all of his potential once the car is more behind him.
So whilst you're fundamentally wrong, I think you've rescued it slightly in that
have I? Thank
if
you.
Lewis Hamilton retires and Mercedes completely rally around George Russell and build the team around him, which I believe every F1 team should build around a number one driver, then yes, maybe Russell could do that. But at the moment, he's got a massive problem, which is that every year that Lewis Hamilton stays in the sport and he can't match him on race pace, all he can do is what he's been doing, which is go for the alternate strategies. And it's made him look good on occasion, but it's a paper tiger.
Yeah, it's the alternate strategies have got him lucky occasionally, isn't it? Whenever Hamilton fails, he does well. Whenever the opponents don't do well, George does. There have been a lot of cases where he's kind of grown out of the misfortune of others, which again is unfortunate because I do think he has so much potential, Russell. But I think a lot of that isn't realized yet, unfortunately, because we saw it at Williams. He was so used to fighting against the car. I think in Mercedes, he kind of got the false impression that he wouldn't have to fight against a car anymore, which of course has turned out not to be true.
How's that worked out? Yeah, it's just, Matt, I don't know. Matt, he came out and he said that a lot of drivers out there don't have spatial awareness, and which would have been way more profound had he not just hit his own teammate in qualifying the weekend before and rejoined unsafely in Monaco. But I don't know. It feels like he's just biting off more than he can chew. And maybe he should be just saying, okay, I'm going to be Hamilton's out and out number 2 here. I'm going to play the team game. I know there's a shelf life on Lewis retiring. In 2024, I'm going to show that I've got the pace. I'm going to build the team around me as Hamilton retires. But I don't know, the way he's just pushing to be number 1 beyond what he's actually delivering makes me sad for the well-wishers of George Russell.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, those comments were pretty savage, weren't they, when he said that? But it's a problem for him. He says he's faster than Lewis, but he's not putting the results there yet, because in Formula One, it's about more than just raw pace. So he's not complete in the way that Hamilton is, in the way that Verstappen is, in the way that Alonso is. Maybe you could sort of put signs there, except for he's not maybe quite fast enough. I feel like with Verstappen, Alonso, and Hamilton, we're talking about 3 drivers on a very distinct plateau, and no one else in the grid is there. They might occasionally bounce up there for a race, but for the consistency, for the completeness of it, this is Russell's struggle now, and he would be smart, as you suggest, to simply put his head down, know in his heart that yes, in qualifying I can probably
in quali he's
Lewis.
there, yeah.
Yeah, I can. I've got the raw pace over Lewis now, and then ask the following question: if that's the case, why am I doing worse in the races very regularly right now? And start answering that. That's what he really needs to do.
Antonia, the live chat is coming in defensive of Russell, and I sort of agree. The team is built around Lewis Hamilton. This is Lewis Hamilton's team.
Yeah, I mean, Paddy in the live chat has said, to be fair to Russell, with Mick Schumacher in the wings, why try? Which
He's probably feeling quite safe, yeah.
But it all jokes aside, it raises the point that Matt was making, which is with all of the greats on the grid, why try? It's like trying, it would be like me waltzing into the boxing ring, and I could try my best to look good, but if Conor McGregor's there, I don't know why I chose boxing as an analogy.
Yeah,
I know nothing about it.
It shows.
But do you know what I mean?
That showed really quickly. That was a paper towel in a water fight.
If I tried to do a penalty shootout and John Terry was next to me,
wow. Yeah, you need to update your soccer references also.
Gosh, I need to stick to F1. But my point is, there are so many greats on the grid right now. Verstappen is a great in the making, arguably already a great. We've got Lewis, we've got Alonso. It's so hard to assert yourself as a good driver amongst these guys. And that's why I completely agree with Matt. He's just got to get his head down and figure out where his strengths are, how to exploit them, and how to build up on where he's lacking.
Okay, so we come to Verstappen, and I struggle when a driver is in a dominant car to really talk about their performance. So I'm offloading it to Cristina. Rate Verstappen's race.
Like, solid 7 out of 10.
Yeah, solid.
Like, he did the job. He did exactly what he was supposed to do. Well, actually, no, he was struggling a little bit on his tires. So I'll give him like an 8.5, because he did manage something that was proving to be a little bit of a challenge, but not a crazy challenge. So, overall good job. But again, he has a car that just does so much, like you said. It's really hard to evaluate him, so hard.
So people who are going to yell at me for being a Perez fan would say, well, Perez shows what a good job that Verstappen is doing. And again, I'm too sad to talk about the ongoing struggles of Sergio Perez. So I'm going to dump that on you as well, Cristina.
Look, I don't know what is going on. I don't know if he changed his schedule, like his morning routine or something, but the way he's struggling in qualifying is absolutely just mind-blowing. Like, it's a good car. Presumably, he hasn't changed anything drastic about his approach to how he does his setup, but there's something that's seriously going wrong. And the part that kind of baffles me is that this is a team that's incredibly self-critical. This is a team that is very good at being analytical and not accepting fault and failure. And so as much as part of it is Perez and him, so much of this, especially compared to Verstappen, he's not living up to the potential of that car that we have seen him do. That's the other thing that's disappointing. It's not even in comparison to Verstappen. It's in comparison to what we've seen him do before. Yeah. And so that's where the disappointment really comes for me, is that he can do better. Why isn't he? And, you know, I do think part of it falls on the team as well, because if a driver is struggling and having the yips for whatever reason, how do you handle that? How do you attack that? How do you help solve that problem? It's not going to disappear by just hoping for the best.
Okay, you said that out loud, and I don't think we're supposed to say the Y word out loud. But look, Cristina, like as a Perez fan, I'm with you exactly. Like that's the same thing I'm yelling at. It's like, I've seen you drive so well. Like I've seen you pull these performances out. I've seen you like win a race from the back of the grid in not the fastest car. What on earth is going on? No, it's a serious question. What on earth is going on? Please answer and solve it somehow. Fair enough, Matt.
Well, I would like to state that I cannot believe I have been doing this podcast with you so long. I am now finding myself in the position of defending Sergio Perez, but yet here I am.
Yeah, Stockholm syndrome. Yeah. Go on, let's go.
First of all, kudos to Max, because in the crazy weather and qualifying, he was the one that absolutely got the job done in that car. So if you want to talk about why Max deserves a high driver rating, I just point at quality and say, look, there you go. It's done.
Yeah.
We can argue about how dominant the Red Bull is now, how close Aston might have been, how much pressure they were under. That's all subjective. Qualifying, that's not. He did the job. Nobody else did. But we can also talk about why that qualifying was a particular challenge for Perez, which had to do with the tires and the temperature. Perez is a noted tire whisperer, which means he makes the tires last a long time, which means he's very careful with the slip angles of the tire, which makes them last a long time, but which means that much less energy goes into the tire, meaning it doesn't get as hot as quick. And this is where I think Red Bull strategy kind of dropped the ball with him. They didn't put him on slicks at the start. They didn't bring him in at the end of his out lap to put him on slicks like Albon was already on. And the way they made him change tires essentially guaranteed him to have cold tires for all of his attempts in Q2. And despite that, he still got kind of close. It wasn't that bad. And then he had a very good recovery race today. It was hard to pass, even in the best car,
it was
especially in traffic. And they managed to get him up there, and he managed to give them fastest lap of the race when they asked him to. He did the jobs. I don't know that I would count this weekend's performance in with a straight up yip, in with a straight up miss, in with a straight up, oh, there you are, there's Q3. Oops, I drove off the track and gave up my only chance to get through. It wasn't that kind of a thing. It was much more nuanced and complex from his point of view, and I think from the team's point of view as well.
Yes, good old reliable Perez doing the job that he is expected to do as a good number 2 driver should. He's in my opinion shaping up to be the Valtteri Bottas to Verstappen's Hamilton.
No, don't do that. Why
He's going to start eating porridge real soon. You just wait.
Well, at least we get to see some butt photos in a river, I guess.
No, of course,
Bottas
the most important component of a number 2 driver. Yeah, that was the highlight of Bottas's career, or Bottas as he was fondly known. No, I think Perez, bless him. We've had this conversation before, actually, where we've said, oh, is he going to push for world championships? Because he thinks he can push for a world championship this season. He thinks he can challenge Max. No, I'm sorry, you can't, but you're doing a really great job of supporting his dreams. I think
the meanest
Perez
possible way you could have said that. Like, I'm devastated with how you said that.
I have the utmost respect for Checo because he's brilliant, fantastic, good driver, reliable. And we've just had some news in. Christian Horner's revealed that the remains of the bird that Verstappen hit got stuck behind the front right brake duct for the whole race. Right, okay, goodness. So Verstappen put on that performance with bird body in his grill.
That changes the score, yeah.
It does. It does. Yeah, it does a little bit.
Hitched a ride. Anyway, but what I'm saying is, Perez isn't going to get world championships. I think that much is an unfortunate reality, but he's doing a pretty good job of supporting Verstappen and doing all of the things that a number 2 driver should be doing. He's the good, reliable, tire whispering, good defender. He checks all of the boxes except the pure, carnal need to win, fire from hell,
Stop! He's already dead. Stop kicking. My goodness. Right. Speaking of, stop kicking, McLaren. Any McLaren fans on the panel?
What is there to say? I mean, they showed real promise at the start of the race. They really, I think they were running P7, P8.
Yeah.
But they just kind of got lost in the DRS train, didn't they? They were pretty anything really. I mean, Norris had a couple of rushes with penalties. Obviously, there was the impeding incident, but then also the backing up during the safety car for unsportsmanlike behavior, which I thought was very rogue, to be honest.
That's a weird one. It's a situation we've come across quite a lot with the double stack and a driver trying to kind of make sure that he's not penalised by that, giving himself enough space behind his teammate. Christina, what do the regulations tell us about unsportsmanlike behaviour? That's the vaguest of vague terms.
Well, the regulation isn't much clearer. It's equally as vague as when we were talking about the unsafe release. Yeah. It's any infringement of the principles of fairness in competition, behavior in an unsportsmanlike manner, or attempt to influence the result of a competition in a way that is contrary to sporting ethics. And I'm sure that there's a whole manual somewhere out there of sporting ethics. Heck, there's probably a university course or something you could take. But I understand if he was backing up the field extremely significantly. And I'd have to go back and look and see exactly how bad it was, because quite frankly, I don't remember them giving the McLarens any screen time up until Norris started complaining about the back wing, which
that
brutal.
Was right at the end.
50 kph in turn 10, and they're usually around 80.
Yeah.
So then yes, that's a significant back up. Yeah.
I think it depends where you did the backing up. So did you brake early? Did you just not lift? Matt, there's a lot of Matt. In fact, you and me, we've had a lot of discussions with the racing drivers we know, with Brad Philpott obviously and Alex Brundle, and we've talked about in a hairpin. I think Luffield's a really good example at Silverstone. If there's a car behind you, are you obliged to get on the power at the expected point? And if you don't, and someone drives into the back of you, whose fault is that? So there's a lot of these discussions around sportsmanship, especially when it comes to a corner exit. But the more usual thing people have done in the past is slow down in the pit entrance. And that's been slammed down on. So Norris has taken a different tactic here.
Yeah, he has. And I think, again, it's just a matter of degree. The reason they absolutely nailed his hide to the wall was because they measured a 50-kilometer-an-hour difference, as Christina correctly noted, between him and Piastri in turn 10 as they were heading down the straight to the pits. And that was only in order to give McLaren a big enough gap so they could double stack and not lose a place. Had he done that in the pit entry, he absolutely would have been penalized for it. I think the stewards looked at it and said, well, if that happened in the pit entry, what would we have done? We'd have penalized him. So we should penalize him for that. But we don't have a regulation for it in the Formula One sporting regulations. What do we have in the International Sporting Code, which is the go-to document for all racing drivers and behaviors and infringements and everything else like that? And they said, well, inherently that's unfair. So there you go.
I don't know. I really struggle with this one because I don't think it's so black and white. I think, it was a bit harsh to penalize him for this because drivers trying to find creative ways to get around the regulations. Again, I've said this so many times, but at what point do we just say, yeah, it's racing, that's just a strategy that they've employed? Unethical, yes, but it was during a safety car period. It
That's
didn't.
Why.
It didn't really affect anyone that badly. It just meant that McLaren had a good chance to double stack. I mean, I completely understand that it is unsportsmanlike, but it's surely all defending is unsportsmanlike because you want the best for your team.
But I like that kind of gamesmanship. So as much as everything that happened in Abu Dhabi 2021 stabs me in the heart and I hate it and we should burn everything about it, I like the fact that all through 2021, Red Bull deployed all the resources they had available. So they deployed Perez because they had him available. I don't agree that they should have a whole second team available unless Mercedes also had that, in which case, fair game. If Mercedes wanted to deploy Williams drivers in the same way that Red Bull deployed AlphaTauri drivers, I love all that sporting element, all that strategy element. So there comes a point, Matt, where we just go, yeah, you know what, let drivers game the system. Let them use every bit of the rules. Let them defend.
And I would say that if it was a 5 or a 10-mile-an-hour discrepancy, he probably would have gotten away with it.
Okay, but he all but stopped.
50 kph under a safety car, how do you not take that seriously as a safety issue, if nothing else? It would be my response. Maybe drivers could be more germane to that. They could be like, oh, no, 50 kph. You might see that variance. But I would guess most drivers are expecting to be going more or less exactly the same speed through there. And that's a big enough difference to make me go, maybe contextually it was more dangerous than we know. And so fair enough, although it wasn't strictly against the letter of the F1 sporting codes per se.
We're getting towards the end of our Canadian Grand Prix race review. Only the awards remain. If you've got this far, you might think we're doing a terribly good job. And if you'd like to buy Matt a pint or me a coffee, you know me, I don't touch the wicked stuff. You can go to missedapexpodcast.com/tip jar if you'd like to go, hey, you guys are doing a great job. If you'd like to become a patron, well, then the world opens up. You can get an ad-free feed at the $1.99 tier. That's 30 cents an episode on average. Or you can join our $5 tier and you can join our Slack forum, a forum that will never black out because we own the forum, so we don't need to protest against anything. So patreon.com/missedapex. Join the Missed Apex community and help us be an independent podcast that is unsellable. It would be impossible to sell Missed Apex podcast because no one could make more resources out of this franchise. Can we be a franchise, Matt? Matt, can we be a franchise?
I like the idea of this.
Let's call it that. No one can make more out of this franchise than we are able to generate in the form of resources from our patrons. So patreon.com/Missed Apex. Help us keep doing what we're doing. Let's go on to the awards. It's the podium of the Canadian Grand Prix. Max Verstappen takes a victory that looked comfortable, but may not have been so comfortable. Could it be foreboding of a title challenge to come? Let's all keep that hope injected into our veins that we'll have some fights for P1. The most fascinating fight out there, however, has to be Lewis Hamilton versus Fernando Alonso over the next 6 or 7 races. Who can keep that going? Fernando Alonso has had the car advantage going forward, and he's certainly the number 1 driver for Aston Martin. Mercedes now listening to James Allison. He sounds like a kid literally just unwrapping LOL dolls, layer after layer. So he's just pulling off layers going, oh, now the doll's got a new booty. New sunglasses for my LOL dolls. And he is just every single race saying, wow, we're going to bring more stuff. And they just seem to have this package going together. So Lewis Hamilton versus Fernando Alonso, I think, is going to be one of the biggest, most exciting battles to look forward to for the remainder of 2023. But our panel here is now going to cast judgment over the Canadian Grand Prix of 2023. And we've got a couple of awards, a good thing award and a bad thing award. So let's start with the thing of the weekend. Let me introduce you to the panel you've enjoyed listening to today. We've got Antonia Rankin, who is annoyingly you're everywhere. You're infusing yourself into the F1 culture and I hate to say it, you did very well on the podcast that dare not speak its name. It is a betrayal, but it was wonderful to see you on such a big platform.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a bit crazy recently, but I mean, I'll never forget my roots. Mist Apex runs through my blood.
Yeah, we're literally the best one. So never forget
my
that.
My favorite.
Follow Antonia, F1 Antonia on TikTok. Yeah. I remembered it. Well done. Got something like 60,000 follows on there. It's absolutely nuts. They're fun. They're informative. Anytime your TikToks appear on my feed, they're great. So go and follow Antonia. The links will be in the show notes below, and also on Twitter, F1 Antonia there also.
Antonia J Rankin.
Why?
I should change that, shouldn't I? It would
Yes.
make life easier.
Yeah. No one cares about the J. Good.
I'll get on that.
But moving on, what was your thing of the weekend this weekend?
I'm going to give it to Lando Norris for absolutely blasting it until the end. He really put his everything into battling until literally the last lap. And it's really nice to see, to be honest. Every place matters. Every single millisecond, I guess for him, especially this weekend, matters. Yeah. And the fighting spirit that he has, I think, is what makes him such a fantastic driver. So full creds for that. He
tried his heart out to get the stewards to disqualify the car in front. And then
maybe not that bit.
In the end, he resorted to trying to overtake him. So yes, you're absolutely right. Okay, so Norris gets Antonia's vote. Cristina, also very active on TikTok. You do a lot of like explainer type videos. I think like people who are newer to the sport, I think like would benefit you just giving everything in a very, dare I say, a journalistic style.
I've been told that, yes.
And where can we find you on TikTok? What should we search?
Cristina.fastcars.
Oh, yeah, these cars are pretty fast. Go and click in the show notes below. So, from this Canadian Grand Prix, who is the thing of the weekend, or what is the thing of the weekend, or when was the thing of the weekend for you?
I'm actually going to give it to George Russell when he snuck in. He snuck in the double overtake on De Vries.
Oh, that was good.
And
yeah.
I want to say Magnussen.
that was quite
good.
Yes, it was.
Getting all tied up with each other and not really paying attention, and they let a heavy hitter through. That was
you have just
stupid
invoked
move on their part.
Yeah,
good moment of opportunity for him.
And you've just invoked this segment.
Whose fault is it?
I can't believe we haven't had one yet. It was actually such a well-behaved race that we didn't have a whose fault is it? So, firstly, I'm disappointed that there wasn't a there goes Russell, because it was very reminiscent, wasn't it, of the Lewis Hamilton 2022 Silverstone where Perez was battling with Leclerc into the Vale chicane and Lewis Hamilton managed to dive his way through, and that almost now I think iconic commentary of there goes Hamilton. It was a very similar move from George Russell, but that led to further incidents between De Vries and Magnussen. Who's got a take on whose fault it was between De Vries and Magnussen? Antonia.
This links into my You Missed the Apex award, because I think Nick De Vries versus Magnussen there was just shocking.
It
was awful. And I'm aware he locked up. There wasn't a lot he could do. And then Magnussen being on the outside had nowhere to go. Or he overbraked, or, but it was just really bad racing from him. And I know De Vries to be better. He's the Formula E champion. He's a good driver. But it was just, for me, there was really poor racecraft shown from him. Definitely his fault. And just not a good, clean battle. Not a good battle, full stop, to be honest.
No, it was scrappy. And actually, Matt, I think you'll have some insight in this. Like, De Vries has been struggling on the brakes. And again, it's in the braking zones where he seems to look the least comfortable.
Yeah, well, Canada is a particularly difficult track for brakes and braking. So I'm not really surprised by that. AlphaTauri has been, well, they haven't been the greatest of manufacturers this season. So he doesn't have a particularly great platform to work with. And, look, the mistake that took them both up the escape road, fair enough. He was on the inside. It was dusty. He locked up. I'm a bit surprised, actually, that Magnussen hadn't already slowed down and was aiming for a cutback, looking at De Vries' positioning. Yeah. But it was really the previous corner that seemed kind of clunky to me. And I know we sort of argue on corner exit, but it seemed like he was not leaving Magnussen enough room on corner exit that sort of led to this
in turn
entire
one. Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In turn one, he definitely he pushed him all the way out, Magnussen. And I think Magnussen actually was quite compliant. So he went all the way off to the point that it wasn't disaster. But if he'd have held his ground, if Magnussen had kept all four wheels on the track, which I think he's entitled to do, I think that ends up being quite a bad crash.
Yeah. And so, I mean, to me, that fundamentally means it's De Vries' fault for the whole thing. Because I think, frankly, if he kept a tighter line, he'd have just, Magnussen had more or less given up on that. The only reason De Vries was still passing him was because they had contact, and he spent so much time shoving him to the outside of the track instead of just getting on with taking a clean line and getting on with getting past him.
Okay, so a diversion there by Cristina, but you're sticking with Russell thing of the weekend.
Oh, absolutely.
That. Okay.
I'm sticking with it. It was a lovely move. It was well timed.
Okay.
It was just nicely done.
Well, if you're wrong about that, what else are you wrong about? I don't know if we can trust any of the regulation stuff you've said now. Fair enough. That's your thing of the weekend. Matt, Trumpets. You are at MattPT55 on Twitter.
Yep.
You're often wrong about stuff on Twitter as well. Follow Matt just to argue with him. He loves it. He absolutely loves that.
It entertains me for hours on end. Yeah. I love nothing better than arguing with people on Twitter, as long as we're having a conversation and it's not just shouting.
No, resort to personal insults immediately. That is the way to Matt Trumpet's heart. But the way to the best thing of the weekend is to ask you directly, Matt, what was your thing of the weekend?
Well, this is hard because what I really want to say is it's got to be Alex Albon, 58 laps on the hard tires, staying in P7. But I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. It's the people who chose to not come in during the safety car that made this race so absolutely interesting. I will give it to them with a strong nod to the Williams strategy department for getting the slicks right in quali and then getting the safety car call also right.
This is a broader thing. I hope this doesn't go too deep, but I wonder, could Hamilton have done better by staying out during the safety car?
Ocon.
I
was convinced plan A was go to the end, but what they saw, they were tricked by Lance Stroll's times, but Lance Stroll's times were in clean air. So they saw how fast the fresh tire was in clean air. They put it on, and then it just wasn't that fast in traffic. That's what happened.
All right. Okay, and the other thing, I was trying to think of another strategy thing. Lewis Hamilton triggered the second stop quite early because the hards weren't working for him. I wonder, could they have gone to mediums earlier and kind of shaken things up a bit more?
It would have been, you would have had to look at the pit window behind him.
Good point.
He would have wanted to come out on those mediums ahead of Leclerc finish behind him. So it was really down to, you can see, actually, I'm looking at the pit stop summary right now because, that's my kind of life. And I can see Leclerc, Perez was in 37, Sainz 38, Leclerc 39, Hamilton 40, Alonso 41, Max 42. So as that pit stop gap appeared, they pitted. But they couldn't do it until the gap behind them was there. Otherwise, they were stuck behind slower cars.
Ask me what my thing of the weekend was, so it's natural.
I'm really curious.
Really?
I tried to steal all of the really good things.
What are you
I've got
about?
Williams, I've got Albon, I've got
you said lots of stuff.
The safety car things, and
what's on your mind? What's on your mind?
What's left?
Yeah,
what could your thing of the week be?
My thing? Thanks for asking. Okay, so my thing of the weekend is Lewis Hamilton and the way that he was able to manage his tyre stints. I think we saw Lewis Hamilton doing what Lewis Hamilton does best, which is, not going out there and thrashing his tyres, going out there, managing stints, and actually kind of delivering. And if you look at the medium tyre stint at the end, there was real potential. Had they had more time on the medium and less time on the hards, he could have gone and taken the fight to Fernando Alonso, and I would have loved to have seen that. At one point, they did get within 1.4 seconds. I think Hamilton got within Fernando Alonso, which kind of made them panic and shake them out of their fuel saving. But going forward with this package on non-street circuit tracks, I think Lewis Hamilton is going to be a force to be reckoned with. Okay, so that's all the good thing award. And I like the good thing award, the thing of the weekend, because we get to be super positive, lovely people. Now, let's get into the worst of the mud-slinking, armchair, strategist and driver stuff as we ask, who missed the apex?
Oh no, you missed the apex.
All right, Antonia, I know it's beyond you normally to get super negative, but who missed the apex for you?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to give an honourable mention, or dishonourable mention, I suppose, in this case, to Nick de Vries. Just not the standard of racing I would expect from a driver of his caliber, the standard of defending you would expect from an F1 driver, generally disappointing battles from his side. But primarily, I would like to give my Missed Apex award to the single piece of commentary from Crofty, wherein he said, "The old switcheroo." And I think I threw up in my mouth a little bit.
Oh no, that's super harsh, mate. Commentary's so hard though, because you just run out of things to say so quickly.
And he is, Crofty's the guy I grew up listening to with all of this.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, that single line, big no from me. Sorry, Chief.
David Croft is undoubtedly the voice of F1 for a generation who does it week in, week out, and you do very quickly run out of things to say. So recently I was putting together a show reel, and I remember I did 2 full seasons of commentary, and I was paid to do it. And I went back to find a clip, and I couldn't find a single clip I was proud of because I was terrible at commentary. Commentary is so hard. But, well, there you go. Rankin dropping the bomb on David Croft there. Cristina, who missed the apex for you?
For me, it's that barrier and the camera angle going down the main straight into turn 1.
Yeah.
I don't know who allowed that camera to be set up that way. I don't know how, with 3 practice sessions and qualifying, they still kept that camera there for the race, and how they kept using it. It would follow the cars down the main straight and then keep following them when they disappeared behind this little wall. Just cut to another camera angle. You have hundreds of cameras on this track. Just make the switch earlier. I don't need to see for like a good 2 seconds just the little camera mounts bobbing up and down. That's not necessary for my enjoyment of this race.
A lot of people were criticizing the broadcast, and it's hard to keep track of stuff, but it just felt like you go, this is Montreal. We've seen better camera angles in the past. We've seen this race come to life better in the past.
Exactly.
All right, Matt Trumpets, I know you can barely say a crossed word ever. You're just not that kind of guy, unless...
Me, Klaus, yell, never.
Okay, but, given that you're old and cranky, could you try and find something negative? Who missed the apex for you?
I'm really frustrated because I had mine all lined up and it was guaranteed to enrage everybody.
Yeah.
But then you've mentioned the TV, and that made me think about the CCTV issue in Free Practice 1 also possibly being a missed apex. Because, if I'm in the FIA, how do I not have a backup worked out with FOM who bring cameras to every single race? But I'm going to take a deep breath, count to 10 backwards, and I'm going to tell you who really missed the apex in this race. Lando Norris.
Why?
Do you recall?
No.
Norris being behind Piastri.
Yes.
And then dive bombing him into turn 10 with a 5-second penalty hanging off of his rear wing. And that wound up putting McLaren, I believe, entirely out of the points, because otherwise it would have been Piastri up there chasing Ocon and finishing either in 9th, or if Stroll managed to get past Bottas and Piastri, 10th. So, yeah, I'm going to say that Norris's selfish behavior, trying to get ahead of his 5-second penalty and still be in the points, cost his team their only shot this weekend after he was penalized for his unsportsmanlike behavior.
And I'm going to give my Missed Apex award. Wow. No one picked Ferrari's strategy team. Oh, my God. So, they got the broad race strategy correct. But for Saturday alone, obviously they have to get the Missed Apex award. Carlos Sainz blocking Ocon in the most dangerous way possible at the end of a fast lap. Having actually, if you look at Sainz's qualifying lap, they had him in traffic and they had him in terrible situations nearly entirely through Saturday, Matt. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you actually were keeping an eye on Sainz, he was the victim much more than he was the perpetrator. And of course, Ferrari completely blowing it on getting Leclerc kicked out in Q2. So yeah, thank you to everyone for not picking Ferrari ahead of me.
You're welcome. And I think it was Gasly, but yeah, they were shocking on Saturday and superb
Gasly,
on Sunday. And just like, I don't know, I went with the broken clock thing, but
superb.
I guess
they
we'll
were normal on Sunday. Thank you very much for joining me for this Canadian Grand Prix race review. Click in your show notes below. If you are an audio listener, go and check out the video just to see what all our ugly mugs look like. And if you're on the video side, if you're a YouTube subscriber, click like and subscribe. Click on the bell so you get a notification when we go live. And also, just download us on your podcast app so we're there in case you need us for your Monday morning commute. Follow my panel. Follow Antonia J. Rankin. Follow Cristina Mace, whose surname is a weapon. Follow Matt PT55. And of course, follow me, Richard Reddy. Follow Spanners. I'm the best one. Until we see you next, work hard, be kind, and have fun. This was Missed Apex Podcast.